Endurance by Alfred Lansing. In 1914, as World War I is erupting all over Europe, the Endurance sets out for Antarctica. Ernest Shackleton is leading an expedition of 27 men to cross the Antarctic continent, something that had never been done before, because it's 1,800 miles of an ice desert wasteland. But he lived in an exploring time and he was an explorer, so he put his crew together and off they went. Then in January of 1915, the Endurance gets stuck in ice and the men have absolutely nowhere to go, nothing to do. They are at the whims of nature. So for months and months, these men have nothing to do but wait to see what happens. And meanwhile, the ice is slowly crushing the Endurance. Their hopes for getting her out of the ice and getting to safety get less and less. So finally in November of 1915, the ship sinks completely and all the men have are the lifeboats. So by some miracle, the men get into the lifeboats and they navigate to Elephant Island, which is an abandoned island, but for a good change of pace for these men, at least it's a solid landmass that isn't going to sink or melt or move around like they've been used to. But Shackleton knows that this isn't going to be good enough, so he takes one of the ships, grabs 5 of the men, and they set off to find South Georgia Island, which will actually have people and supplies. The problem is it's 800 miles away and it's a tiny island, so the chances of them actually hitting the island are pretty small. They know if they miss it, they just go for open water, and not only are they doomed, but the rest of the men in Elephant Island also doomed. Again, by some miracle, Shackleton and these 5 men are able to find the South Georgia Island, but all the people are on the east side of the island. They land on the west side of the island. This is 1916, so they've been stuck in Antarctica for months and months now. And in this weakened condition, low on supplies, Shackleton has to take 2 of his men to cross over the middle of this island, which is mountainous, it's icy, it's really hazardous. It's a complete miracle that they're able to get over it and get to the other side. And by the time they finally get there, they show up and their hair is long, their clothes are falling apart, they're covered in dirt, they're completely unrecognizable, and meanwhile everyone knows about Shackleton's expedition, but they just assume that he's been dead for a long time, and yet here he just shows up on this island. This is an Apollo 13 story. You have a grand mission where things go wrong, and then it turns extremely interesting because you have this interesting group of people that are trying to survive through impossible odds. Through ingenuity and the daring risks that they take along the way, they actually succeed. These are great stories and rightfully the stuff of legends. There's a reason we keep retelling them over and over again. I give a lot of credit to this book for bringing this story to life. The book does a great job of getting in the heads of each of the characters. I especially love when this book gets inside Shackleton's head, because after the trans-Antarctic mission falls apart, his sole job becomes get the crew members to safety. And that becomes his day and night obsession. He is definitely the hero of the story. He's constantly doing these calculations of thinking about this person and how's the morale doing, and he has to be the one to make a lot of the tough decisions along the way that could mean life or death. The book also does a good job of putting you in the crew members' situation. It's amazing how hazardous and on edge they were the whole time. If you fall into the water, you're probably not going to make it. There's no dry clothes you can put on. The wind is freezing, the air is cold, you're low on supplies, you're low on food to give your body the energy it needs to produce the heat that it needs to stay alive. And I was also struck in this book how they were dependent on nature. Like, we hope the wind blows us toward this island or we're just not going to make it. Like, there was a lot of luck in this story too, in addition to skill, bravery, and all the other things that come out when you have people in very perilous situations. The amazing part of this whole story is how much documentation we have of it, because we have the men's journal entries and we have the photographer's photos. But even better than that, they actually found the Endurance at the bottom of the ocean last year. And you got to remember, when this thing set off, it was only 2.5 years after the Titanic set sail. And you can probably picture pictures of the Titanic and how falling apart it is. The Endurance is much better preserved because of where in the ocean it fell. There's much less decay. And so it's cool to see the images of the actual ship. As for the book itself, if I haven't already made this clear, I highly recommend 2 thumbs up, 4.5 stars.